Scott. That's okay?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Alright, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out. So, our talk today is going to be about the safe use of chainsaws while in a tree, and also the safe work practices while using a chainsaw in a tree. So my name is Dan Holliday. I've been an arborist for about 14 years now. I run the website climbingarborist.com, which is a website that covers a lot of tree climbing techniques, industry information, that kind of thing. And I also run a website, climbingarboristjobs.com, which is what it says on the tin. It's a job board for arborists. This is my co-host for the day, George Keays.
Hello, I'm George. From a similar part of the world as Dan, the north of England. I've been an arborist for about 10 years now. Came over to the Pacific Northwest 5 years ago in BC, and occasionally get to help Dan out with his projects.
Awesome. So a quick summary of the talk. So this is a talk that me and George are both really passionate about. Is the safe use of chainsaws within a tree. So we're going to talk about obviously two hands on a chainsaw. That's a really big focus of this talk. We're going to talk about the reasons why and the reasons why not, and we really want this talk to be a huge audience participation. So if you're a working arborist, we want you to, give us your feedback, ask us questions, give us your experiences. If you one-hand a saw, which I'm sure many of you do, I'm pretty certain that if there's anybody here that hasn't one-handed the chainsaw, put your hand up. That's what I thought. So we're all part of this community. We all want to learn. Nobody's here to point fingers at anybody, but we want to understand why it is that you feel like you have a need to one hand, because for the longest time, probably for the last 4 years now, I've made a conscious effort that I wouldn't one hand anymore. So I don't feel like I'm a slower arborist, and that's the main point, is that everybody feels using a saw one-handed is for speed. So anyway, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about work positioning and how your work positioning is going to make you more efficient. It's going to make you think a little bit more, and then over time you're going to become a much better arborist, more efficient arborist, and safer, which is the main point. We'll talk about breaking bad habits, how I kind of transitioned out of the use of one hand now and again to completely not doing it at all. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then towards the end we're going to do a little demonstration, probably the last half hour, just to kind of show the differences really in good work positioning. So yeah, we want to give a little bit of food for thought to the audience, and hopefully change some minds. Hopefully at least you'll go away thinking, I'm going to try this for a month or so. I'm going to see how different it is to be out at work and completely strict with yourself. And if you can give it a month and see how it goes, I think you'll stick with it, because it's a transitional phase. It's definitely hard at first to cut out those bad habits, but hopefully you'll go away wanting to do so. We're going to share. Well, George is going to share a story of one of his friends, which is it's not a good story, but it is a good story for this talk, if you know what I mean.
We want to hear some of your stories as well. I think towards the end.
Yeah,
I'm sure everyone's got some. So
if we've got some time after George has done the aerial demonstration, we'd love to hear any stories, especially if they've happened to you. If anybody's cut themselves pretty bad, or fallen out of a tree, or has friends that have that, we want to hear those stories, because we share experiences. That way we can learn from it. And then we'll talk about speed and efficiency, and that's pretty much it. So just a bit of background on myself. I trained at college. I did a diploma in arboriculture when I was 19, and came out of college. After about 6 months of working for a small company, I went to work for another small company, and I worked there for 6 years. And that's where I learned to climb from the boss. The boss was the only climber, and I was taken on to be the lead climber with only 6 months experience, which is pretty nerve-wracking, but it meant I progressed, I think, more than most because I got the opportunity. The downfall of having just a small company, working for just a small company, meant that there was nobody else to learn from apart from my boss. So everything he did, I copied basically. I mean, I'd had some formal training at college, so I'd got a lot of the good fundamentals down. But then working for 6 years for the same guy and not really having much outside influence other than, you know, the guys that I worked with, meant I only got exposed to how one guy worked. He was pretty safe himself, but he had one really bad habit, and that bad habit was to climb the tree, get your final time point that you could work the tree from, and then toss your lanyard out the tree. I don't need that anymore. And his reasoning for it was the lanyard just gets caught around stuff. It's a hindrance to him. There's no use for it once you've ascended the tree. So that's how I climbed. That was my style. I would go get my final time point and then toss the lanyard out of the tree. I don't need that anymore. And only since kind of traveling a bit and doing competitions and working for other companies did I realise how valuable and how important using that lanyard is really. And looking back, it was such a foolish mistake. But just having one guy's opinion and him kind of, you know, always giving you his opinion, and it kind of sinks in, and you have no other opinions to draw from. So that was what I did. And the fact that he was a very good tree climber, like skill level wise, made it even harder to think that was wrong. So anyway, that's my experience. George's is a little different.
Yeah, I started probably 10 years ago, back in England, working for a company in London, and I think like probably almost everybody here, I started on the ground. No qualifications specific to Arb at that time. Working the street trees of London and doing the London plain pollards that happen there. There's a lot of very fast, thank you, very fast climbers. So my first experience, my first impressions of the industry was speed is good, and if you're the fastest climber who can peg around the tree like a squirrel knocking branches off, then you're the guy, you're the top dog. So that really set in with me. Luckily, when I decided to go and be a climber, in England we have tickets you have to do. They're called MPTCs, and you can do them in a college course like Dan did over a couple of years and learn a lot about arboriculture. Or you can do what I did, and it's just a couple of week-long courses where you go to a college, you have an intensive 3 or 4 days learning to climb a tree, and then an assessment, an aerial rescue, an assessment, and then another week of learning to use a chainsaw safely in a tree, and you make some pruning cuts, and you're assessed on how you hold the saw and how you use your PPE and your positioning and all that. So that gave me a really firm sort of standard to work to when I started in the industry. And fortunately, my assessor and my instructor for that course also ran a tree company, and he took me on for my first proper climbing job. So I could say the first few years of the industry, I was pretty privileged to have some really good tutelage and work in an ultra safe environment. I still worked occasionally with guys with different habits, but it was pretty solid. I came over to Canada. I worked for Davey for a short time, and then picked up with Bartlett in Delta, BC. Stayed with them for 4 years, and became the local office safety coordinator guy there. And that was another kind of step in the safety direction where I knew I had some good training and some good techniques, but suddenly I'm training other guys to do what I'm supposed to be good at. And it's like you're looking in a mirror every day, and I've got to be whiter than white. I can't be one-handing every now and again, or not lanyarding in for my chainsaw cuts, and then kind of telling the guys in the safety meeting not to do it. So that was good. I left Bartlett and started contracting a year and a half ago, thereabouts. And that was a big eye-opener. I'd done some contracting before, but started up with a real production-orientated company on the North Shore of Vancouver as a removal climber, and they'd send me out with sort of 4 groundies to strip down Doug firs as fast as I could go, and got to keep 4 guys busy. So that was a real, not what I was used to. I was out of my comfort zone, and I remember like a couple of the guys saying, "Oh man, you two-hand a saw religiously," like it was something strange, and it was strange to me not to two-hand it. But I felt the pressure, and I felt the peer pressure definitely to try and keep the guys busy and to try and go with the way that they worked. So I would start one-handing, I would start cutting and chucking and trying to get the butts towards the chipper, and I had to definitely tell myself not to do that, and that the way I was doing it was the correct way. And it's, peer pressure is a really strong thing. That I had Dan's voice in the back of my head cracking the whip. So, so yeah, I've had my fair share of close calls and accidents in spite of training. So it's, I don't need to iterate the point that it's a super dangerous industry.
Yeah. So hands up if you believe that we're in a dangerous industry. Yeah, there we go. So this is definitely a dangerous industry as you look from the outside. It's terrifying because one wrong move and that could be your career over. But with the right risk mitigation, it brings it down enough to not feel like it's too dangerous. Like for the last number of years, I think probably the last time I felt worried in a tree was mainly down to the tree itself. When you're dealing with a bit of a sketchy tree, that's when you maybe gives you funny feelings in your stomach, and you're hanging on a little bit tighter, and you're double checking everything more than you would normally. So yeah, it is a dangerous industry. So at first we start on the ground. Everybody comes into the industry. Nobody's got any experience, so we start on the ground. We start dragging brush. We start helping the climbers, and so we have to figure out the dangers of that. Is stuff falling from a tree, stuff being thrown at you by the climber if you're not quick enough. You're not dragging the branches quick enough. Things on the floor to trip over. Then we move on to learning to use a chainsaw. Learning to use a chainsaw is pretty dangerous in itself, especially when you first start doing it, because you don't understand kickback, you don't understand tension and compression on branches, that kind of thing. So we learn to use chainsaws. Like before we start climbing, we really need to learn about trees themselves. Like we need to know the difference in how different species react. We need to know that the signs to look for, for decay, and if a tree is safe to climb. How strong we can anchor into branches. All these kind of things. We're constantly assessing every job site we go to. Then we learn to climb, which is, we have to learn how to tie knots that support our light. We have to learn how to inspect all our gear. We have to learn the most basic techniques so we can actually get up in the tree. And then we get confused by our employees who can already climb, throwing all this shiny new gear at us, saying, "Oh, try this, try that," when we have no idea how to tie just a normal prusik loop. So it's, especially with all the equipment now, it's getting confusing for the younger guys. And then to add into the mix all of that, once you've learned to climb, we took a chainsaw into the mix. So it's very dangerous at that point, especially for the new guys, because you've kind of got all this stuff going through your head that you've just learned, and then you wield in a chainsaw while dangling on a rope from who knows what height. So it's very dangerous for especially the young guys. It's dangerous for all of us, but we can mitigate that risk so much so that it doesn't feel like it's dangerous anymore, and we're confident in our abilities to go out and not come back in an ambulance. So George is just going to run through, the basics of the chainsaw quickly, like the safety features and all that, because that's what we're talking about.
So we're going to start off super basic, and I'm not going to say anything that anyone here doesn't know already, but thanks Casey for the saw. It's beautiful. So it's pretty obvious that a chainsaw is one of, if not the most dangerous power tool available on the market. I can't think of anything much more dangerous really. And when you, like Dan says, when you throw it into the mix with climbing and using ropes and working at height, then you got to know what you're doing. You've got to try and mitigate some of those risks. So the chainsaw has come along, I think, a long way since they first produced it, and the modern chainsaw is a pretty fantastic thing. So we all know the safety features of the chainsaw. We've got two handles here, front handle for balance and positioning, and a rear handle for the throttle. On the throttle we've got the deadsman, so we can't activate that throttle accidentally, get the chain spinning. We've got the chain brake. We all know what that does. Keep the chain from moving. We've got inertia brake that's a part of the chain brake, so in case we get a kickback, it's going to activate the chain brake and we're not going to get a moving chain coming towards us. What's key is that your chainsaw is maintained properly. There's no point in having a saw that's falling apart, or there's too much dirt in the chain brake and you can't easily snap it on. You've got to have a sharp chain and properly set depth gauges. You don't want to have dull chain. You don't want to be pushing through and following through after you cut and going towards your leg or going towards your rope. Similarly, you don't want an over sharp chain that's pulling in and you're having to reset your saw every time because it's bogging down. So maintenance is key, and it's pretty clear when we look at the chainsaw in itself that you're not going to get full function of those safety features unless you're holding the saw correctly. You're not going to be able to activate the chain brake with one hand, for example. You're not going to be able to let off the throttle as easy unless you're holding it with two hands. So I'll pass on to Dan.
Yeah, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. Hands up everybody who has in the past used a saw one-handed. Nice, so who hasn't ever used a saw one-handed? Okay, so we're all on the same page there. Okay, so that means I can pick anybody out of the audience. Does anybody? Casey's got his hand up.
I want to point something out. There's a typo here. It says chainsaws can be a dangerous weapon if they fall into the wrong hands.
Yeah, that is a typo.
Hands being plural.
Yeah.
Would be two hands. It should just say hand.
Yeah, it says hand on here, but they wrote it wrong in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah,
Thanks, man.
So does anybody want to pitch in why they use a saw one-handed? So who uses a saw one-handed currently? Okay, so that's good. That's a few less hands in the air. So who wants to, give us some reasons? Yeah, Casey.
First thing I can think of, I did a little spruce tree the other day. It was like 30 feet tall, 200 branches on it. You can't climb through them, so you can't set up your rigging. And it was just a cut and chuck tree. Everything I could handle with the left hand. It wasn't yanking me down the tree. There was flowers beneath, so I couldn't let stuff just fall. And so that was the situation I was in.
Yeah.
And so what I do when I'm in that situation is I make sure I'm making a square cut. Like I'm not going to be reaching over like this. I'm going to keep it in front of me, make sure that saw's going straight down instead I add an angle, because if you angle it, it's going to run down towards your hand.
Yeah, it's great.
That situation, it made sense to me to use one hand.
Yeah.
What sort of diameter branches are we talking on this spruce? Like, probably
It
quite.
would have been a lot of work to hand saw the whole tree.
Yeah.
So were you on a crew at the time, or was it just a
two-man crew?
two-man crew? And
Really small tree.
were you knocking stuff down faster than your guy could clear it?
Yes.
Yeah. So the first thing to me would be, well, hang on a minute, he can't clear it as quick as I'm cutting it down. So if I just kind of take a step back a minute, so me and Casey know each other quite well. We've competed in the same competitions quite a bit, and I know you're a very, very competent climber. Which this is where it surprises me a little, because I know you have all the skills to do everything, by the book, as safely as possible. And I kind of know why it creeps in the using of a saw one-handed, and why it probably happens to, or has happened to most of us, is because we all think it's never, like, an accident's never going to happen. Is it? You obviously.
Over 20 years with the saw, I've never cut myself. Besides sharpening.
Yeah. But you obviously feel like it would have been so much more effort to be. So you were just spurring up the tree.
It was a 30-foot spruce.
Yeah.
Real bushy, can't climb through the branches because there were so many.
Yeah. But
and there was a few flowers beneath it that they didn't want damage.
Could you not undercut a bunch of branches with your saw with two hands?
I've never tried that.
Give it a go. Make a bunch of undercuts. Put your saw back on your harness. Grab your handsaw and just finish them, and it's pretty often with the spruce branch, especially if it's thick as what you're saying, it's one stroke, maybe two if you got like a Zubat or something. Then you're chucking, and you're raining shit down on your groundy. Just give them a chance and take your time.
Let them catch up.
I know you want to stop and have a slow.
but you're letting catch up, which means you get to sit there for 5 minutes while not doing anything.
Well, I've never even heard of or tried undercutting and then undercutting
Yeah.
launch.
Yeah. Then you can get your phone out and you get the Instagram shots going.
George, Dan, I think that scenario it's really it's common, and it presents a situation where the branches are too small to rig.
Yeah.
But they're at the sides where they're too you've got to come up with a solution. I think undercutting and even doing a little bit of a side cut.
Yeah.
And then you can do 2 or 3 branches, and then you put your saw away, and it's literally it's a one cut from the top, 1 or 2, and then the branch is off. Yep. But that is the real situation where you're stripping your tree, and then the branches are too small to rig. Yet they're too big. They're too big to just cut with your hand saws. It's going to be too many strikes. So that's definitely a practical solution. See, there's a little nick underneath, and sometimes you can even cut to the side a little bit, just so you kind of like a smiley face, the sides underneath. Just before that point where it does pinch your saw, and you can do that to 2 or 3 branches, put the saw away, then have control of the hand. With the hand saws, literally 1 or 2 cuts. So that is. There's a way around it.
Wouldn't have an answer, but okay.
Try that.
Does anybody else have another reason or another scenario why they might feel the need for one hand?
Locking out trunk work.
Pardon?
I don't do it anymore, but that's the way we do it. Still
Pushing
get
a chug
saws
off.
in, locking out trunk work.
Yeah.
The saw, the only danger is the saw falls through and cuts your strap or something like that. But otherwise, there's no tip contact, and the saw is buried in the wood. And as soon as you do your pullback, you can't come back at it. So you still see guys doing that all the time.
That's how I do it.
That's how I do it too.
So
But it does come back.
So that is one area piecing down that me personally, that's one that I find is the most ridiculous out of all of them. The reason being is that I've never, I don't know, even throughout my whole career, I've never felt that I've wanted to push like that, because purely being in that position and having a saw that you're only controlling with one hand, so you have less control of the saw. Having this hand I don't know, pushing or whatever you're doing with it, which feels unnecessary to me. If you can just do like a step cut, or I don't know if everybody calls it a step cut,
Two extra cuts.
snap cut.
That's two extra
And
cuts.
with really
So
big wood.
The way to do it is you push, and you've got the saw at high revs, and then as it pushes
It's
through,
one
you
extra
rock
cut,
the
not
piece
two extra
back,
cuts.
and the saw pops out, and the piece is ready to go.
So
I'm being devil's advocate.
yeah, no,
That's
it's
good.
Yeah, it's good.
We like
So,
it.
so it's one extra cut for starters. And when you're doing a snap cut or step cut, when I do it, I will go pretty much. I'll go further than 3/4 of the way through. So like all the way through, take the saw out, and it's just literally a little nick on the back side to overlap them, and then you can put your saw down, and then you have two hands to deal with the piece of wood. You can because if you're piecing down a stem, you're probably piecing it down for a reason.
Yeah.
So just to kind of push it off with one hand, and then be worried about where the saw's going to go. Surely you've not got as much control.
The saw is sewed before you push it off. So
Okay.
it's a cut, and then once you get into the last hair, you just rock that piece back.
Yeah.
The saw is out.
Okay.
And you hang it.
So the reason you're holding,
Take weight off.
the reason you've got your hand up there is to push it so it doesn't trap the saw.
When I get into bigger stuff, the snap cut makes all for me. It's a lot more work for me to pull that saw out. It's a shoulder that's like that, or like that. And then reach around and do a snap cut.
So you're on your
But
when you start your, what?
DK slider, you can pick it up at Westburg. And it's awesome. Go ahead.
Your first cut is a push cut.
With a big saw or small saw?
Either.
Either. Tell me what you
Yeah,
do.
I will
You start pushing your way.
75% of the way through.
I don't know.
My
I'm
hand up on top of it, and I'll finish the cut. You
I
fill the
find
saw
that-
before you put it back. Not always.
If that log comes clean before the tip of the bar is out, I've had the bar years ago, the whole log spun and it kicked the bar back at my chest.
yeah.
And the log went like this way, and that was like this big. So if it's a powerful enough saw and the chain biting as much as it is, and you go all the way through like that, you have no control of which way
You still
you know,
got the
let's say your
potential
spur
for
kicks out when
follow through
your hand's
afterwards,
pushing
and then
on it,
you've got
that log's gonna go wherever
a
it
heavy
wants.
saw that you can't control dropping down.
Do you
On the side.
do you do that technique on smaller wood
Yeah, with the climbing saw.
with a climb saw? Yeah. And then with the bigger saw,
Bigger stuff.
bigger saw.
I know I do it, and I know it's wrong, and I'm not going to try and explain why I do it. I know
Dan, there's
I
a question
feel
back
a
here.
little scared, but
Yeah.
most of my cuts I make, I feel 100% confident.
Because to have I don't know, to have one hand on a, sorry, are we talking like a 440, 660, or
261 and up.
261 and up? So to have, say, let's say a 440, to only have control of the saw with the rear handle, which is like, you haven't got any control of the leverage yet. Like, you can't do anything if that saw can do whatever it likes at that point, can't it? The only control you have is maybe you digging the dogs in and you kind of levering it around.
But the reason I do it is just because having to pull out a big saw and reach around, it's twice as much work for me.
But what if you start with your back cut and you cut in towards yourself? I know some people might argue against that, but that's how I would do it. I would start around the right side, bring the bar in towards myself. The chain's pulling, it's super easy. I'll rev it as I'm coming out to push out the sawdust from the kerf. Chain brake on just when I'm at the edge there, and bring it back up. I can put my elbow into my stomach. I've got the full weight of the saw resting on the piece or whatever. And then it's, if you're putting your elbows into your stomach just when you're just to start yourself off, you're really not having to deal with the weight of the saw outside of your power zone there, really, apart from when you're just backing up.
but doing that is only necessary when you've got like a 660 or
A big
something.
saw,
Yeah, really. So there's kind of there's no reason with like even a 261 is not a heavy saw, is it? And even like a 361 is not a heavy saw or whatever. So pulling that out to do like a quarter of a cut on the other side is, especially if you're using it with two hands and you're in a good work position, is no big deal, is it?
But if you got a DK slider, you can keep two hands on the whole time and cut straight through.
If you've got DK slider, and it means that you can hold the saw with two hands, and that is a fantastic bit of kit. Yeah. Question over here.
So I just got buffed up, and now I do one hand. I'm really trying not to now, and been trying to deal with a lot of. Do you guys ever climb with climbing wedges?
Yeah.
For the one handing. So now whenever I'll snap cut on the way down, and then whenever I'm doing the bigger cuts, I just slide my climbing wedge that's strapped to there.
Yeah.
And then it relieves me from having to do that.
I have a little pocket wedge on the end
Yeah.
of my steel core, which is just super handy to just pop in there.
Is that a pretty efficient way? Like I said, I've done it exactly the way everybody else is talking, and I started doing it that way, and I feel comfortable with it.
I prefer a snap cut, just me, but I prefer just having a piece. I know it's going to stay there until I want to break it off.
Even on bigger stuff?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the balance, I think, of the piece you're taking, and it's, you've got to judge its characteristics as to whether it's going to stay there when you go all the way through or not.
I find that with the smaller wood snap cuts,
Yeah.
once you get into the bigger stuff, just cutting straight through is preferable. But I think people need to realize there's two ways that kickback happens. One is contact with the tip of the bar, but the other one is when wood compresses. When your saw is in the wood, you might be pushing, but if you slack off a little bit, that compression causes kickback too. So when your chain gets pinched, that can create kickback.
There's a third way too. If you contact a piece of metal in that cut,
Yeah.
stops the chain right away.
Yeah, that's
Like an iron nail or something.
that's a really good point. Good point too, Gareth. And it's these little unforeseen circumstances that happen very, very rarely. But these are the circumstances where having hold of a saw incorrectly is, it can be life changing. Because anytime I ever see anybody piecing down a bit of wood and doing that method, like holding it with one hand, I just cringe. I look up at the tree if I'm working with somebody doing that, and I just absolutely cringe, because all I can see in my head is that saw just kicking back, and that's not going to be pretty. So does anybody else have a different scenario where they might use a saw one-handed?
I have a battery-powered saw now,
Yep.
and it's awfully tempting because I can pull it off on the belt one-handed, and I can turn it on one-handed, and I can just start it one-handed. It's a big temptation for me now.
Doesn't even sound dangerous.
That's very true, especially with the very small light saws. I have an MS-150 that I bought fairly recently, and that is so light it kind of feels like you're climbing with a handsaw on your belt, because it's so light. But
It's walkerized too, right?
yeah. But having a light saw, that's for me. That's all about efficiency and kind of using it in the right scenario for pruning trees and things, so that I'm not. As you can see, I'm a pretty skinny kind of guy. I'm not a big muscly guy, so I do everything I can to make life easy for myself, which is the whole part of this conversation. This topic is that everything to do with using a saw safely, using it with two hands, is to make it easier for me, easier on my body, because you hold the saw out like that, even a small saw out like that for long enough, and man, that begins to wear on your shoulders, and because it's something that happen overnight. Like you don't use a saw for one day one-handed, and then the next day, your shoulder's absolutely shot. It's something that happens over the 10-year period or so. So you have to kind of recognize this early on and figure out what's the most comfortable and most efficient position for me to work in, because being an arborist, I think it's about playing the long game, and figuring out. Obviously, we don't want any serious injuries, so we want to work safe, have good work positioning, have the correct use of a chainsaw. But we also want to realize that using the saw with two hands, using it in the power zone, as much as we can, not like full stretch above the head kind of thing. All these things add together to help us be more efficient, and then to help us have a longer lifespan or career span, should I say?
Or both.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody else different reason? Again, yes, Dan.
If I'm out on a limb, I don't have anywhere to lanyard into, and I'm making a cut that's away from me, and I want to use this hand as a balance point. I kind of form a triangle, and I reach out, and I spit. So I kind of like to be in line when I'm making this, popping the end off of the branch.
Yeah. So do you ever think, like, when you're in that situation, using your lanyard on the branch that you cut in to create that triangular work position,
Like around near my feet.
Yeah, kind of put it maybe around near your waist, or where you're pressing with your feet, so you're pushing against your lanyard, which kind of holds your lanyard in place, and then that means that you don't have to hold on with this right hand, enabling you to use the second hand. Because
I had to. A
That's
fir
what I
branch
would
though can't handle some of those forces all the time. So it's like helping keeping your weight off of the branch, and reaching out.
So while you mean, if you're trying to keep your weight off the branch, that means that you're pulling on your line while you're trying to make a cut.
A little bit. Not
But surely you could then,
where the breaking point is.
surely you could use your lanyard to pull the branch up.
Right, you can put your lanyard
Yep.
around and tighten up your line and really have a nice solid
Yeah.
thing like that.
Or choke
Yeah.
your lanyard in
But
and
then you
slide it
still have
back
the
in.
twisting of your body and having to get so close to what you're doing. Do you ever think sometimes that twisting is worse than the one hand? Sometimes I feel like I feel awkward when I'm twisting, whereas as opposed I feel more in line.
I feel like
And of course I've been doing it for 30 years kind of thing, so I know that has something to do with it.
Yeah.
I feel like the trade-off in safety and having control over the saw whilst you're making that cut is worth the twist, as opposed to not.
I think there's two things there. One is you just got to shift your body further out to the end of the branch, and then you're not having to. Then your work zone is close to your body. You're not having to twist like that. So get your body further out to the end of the limb. And you're not having to do that. Your work zone is here. The other thing you got to think about, Dan, is with the one-handing. Sure, it might be better. You might think it's better in that position, but you're building up repetitive strain injuries as well. So we're not just talking about acute cuts, but also long-term repetitive strain injuries, which are happening that we might not realize. So I think work positioning, getting further out, keeping in your power zone, preventing that twisting.
Another point though, on your side of things is if you are doing that cut, you're knocking all that weight off, that branch is going to lift up,
Exactly.
kick your feet off or
Yeah.
whatever, and
Yeah,
maybe
exactly.
put it by your foot.
Especially if it's a Doug fir
Like,
branch.
that
Well,
has to
that
fall.
would be my case in that thing. I'm holding on to my rope. If I gotta move, I want to be holding my rope and not be like, whoa, and fall off the branch.
But what about choking your lanyard?
Yeah. I mean, I do.
Yeah,
I
but-
mean,
Sometimes you get out on the end of like a maple and like these low ones, it's gonna jump 4 feet.
Exactly.
There's no way you're really gonna be able to. You can't really pull it all the way up, then you cut the weight off.
think as well,
So then
guys,
you end up, and then pops up 4 feet, it's a longer head.
if you're in this precarious position, that's when your hand saw comes into play. You don't have to use your chainsaw.
I do think in a lot of these positions, because you're accepting the fact that you're going to use it one-handed, you almost are conceding to not going out as far as you maybe should or need to. You're thinking, oh, well, you know, if I hold onto the rope here, I know it's going to spring up a load, so I can hold my weight. So I'll just do it with one hand. Whereas if you were thinking, I'll do this with two hands, I'll maybe go out that little bit further, get myself in a comfortable position, and you're taking less weight off, so it maybe wouldn't spring up quite as much. But because you're kind of accepting that you're willing to use the saw one-handed, it means that you're willing to take the cut where it's going to be, you know, a little less work for you. It's not as, you know, you don't maybe have to think as much about getting further out or that kind of thing.
When they were making this decision at the ANTI committee, it was a really difficult thing. And lots of arguments that we're having. It seems like this argument is never going away. Probably never go away. But the statistics were there that there's way too many accidents that were connected. You're able to trace back to a one-handed chainsaw incident. And so there may be circumstances where we all continue to feel comfortable doing that, especially if you're you're self-employed and you don't have an ANSI regulation hanging over your head. But if you're an employee, obviously you're regulated and you can't do that. But there's enough statistics that somehow trace this back that where we just blanket no circumstances you can one-hand a chainsaw period until end of discussion. I'm just saying the committee had a really hard time coming up with that. They had a long series of huge debates over it before they decided, okay, we're going to do this.
For me, I mean, I haven't been in the industry as long as a lot of people here, and I was definitely taught to use two hands, and it's kind of the safe point I always go back to if I'm feeling a bit sketched out. I kind of agree partly that maybe there are situations where you feel more comfortable and you might weigh up the pros and cons and decide that the safest option maybe in your mind at that point would be to hold your rope in one hand. But I think there's also an argument that once you blur the lines like that, and every tree is different, once you accept that there might be a situation where it's acceptable, then where do you draw the line again? I don't think personally that I'm kind of disciplined enough to say, oh, I can do it here, but I'm not going to do it here. I'm not going to cross, or I'm going to do it at the limb tips, but I'm not going to do it in the stem. So for me, I think just making sure that whenever I pick up the chainsaw, it's going to be with two hands, or I'm going to find an alternative. I'm going to go a bit further out, or a bit further in. I'm going to rig, or I'm going to undercut and then finish with a handsaw if I really need to have that extra stability.
Why don't you share your buddy's story?
Can I just share one other maybe example? Just to go back to you, Dan, that ergonomics of your body. You're out on the limb. Yep, I get the triangle. You're going to reach out. Yeah, there's weight on the tip of that branch. You're going to cut the tip up. Can you get the undercut in? Going to make a safe cut. Am I ready to go for a ride? So I've loaded my line. I've got my lanyard down on the stem as well. What about take a sling, a loop, put it in there, put your foot into that, get your body down into that angle where you are comfortable, and then to reach and do that cut. You've got the lanyard, you've got the primary line. I know.
I've tried that sling stuff, and my foot
Get caught up
too much. Put my foot in the sling.
I'm just thinking about
I have to have my spikes on.
Yeah.
I mean, there's various different techniques that some people feel like they can use, some people don't. Me personally, I can't remember a time, like I say, in the last 4 years I decided to make that change, and I'm not going to use a saw one-handed anymore. And I don't remember there being a time where I felt I can't do this, I literally can't do this, like this pruning cut or this, take off this branch with two hands. Like that point has never arisen, and maybe that is because I've already told myself in my head that I'm not going to do it anymore. I already pre-plan and figure out in my mind what I need to do to get to those branches, because what you were saying, Dan, might happen, like it might spring up on you. So I think I've already pre-planned in my head for those scenarios, and maybe I've figured out a different route in the tree that I'm going to take. Maybe I'm going to set up a whole rigging system for the entire tree, because I realise that a few of these branches are going to spring up, which is going to be dangerous for me. So I'll set up a rigging system at the beginning of the job, and I can then do where I wouldn't have rigged a few branches just because I could have, I decided I could do it anyway. It means that the system's already there, so I may as well utilise it and take off those few branches that need it, that I'm worried about, but also take off a bunch more, and it creates for a safer and more controlled day of work, because you've already set the system up. So it's once that's set up, it's not taking more time. Yeah, go on, George. We'll,
we had a couple more questions, I think.
Yeah, I was going to ask basically what you just talked about, like in your approach and your planning of the tree. What are some of the things that you think encroaching, setting up rigging on, like you setting up an entire other rigging system at another angle?
Yes, so I was going to talk about like the transition period that kind of happened with me when I decided. So I'll cover that in a few minutes or so. Yeah.
We're going to go on to my buddies.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Time.
maybe I'll just rattle this one off, and then maybe we'll come to some more questions towards the end. But whilst we're on that subject, maybe we'll get to my story, and we'd like to hear. I'm sure everybody's got similar stories of their own, but back when I used to work in England, my lead climber, really good arborist and a lot better climber than me at the time. Obviously, I learned a lot from him, but he would occasionally one hand, but I still thought he was pretty sound, pretty safe arborist. I came over to Canada, like I said, and then got back in touch with him to find out how he was doing, and he'd been off work for quite a long time, told me what happened, showed me the scar on his arm. And so he'd been up a maple tree, a lot smaller than this, but he was probably 20-25 feet up. For some reason, felt the need to cut and hold because it was just a habit he had. I think he crossed, he got a kickback, and he nicked the underside of his forearm with the tip of his saw. So he's 20 feet up. He severed all the tendons on the underside of his forearm, so he can't close his left hand. He severed the artery, so he's had to take his other hand and plug the artery with his thumb. So now he can't use his hitch, and he can't get down. If he tries to use his hitch, he bleeds out, potentially, so he's stuck. So luckily he's working with a pretty new guy. I think he must have been with us less than a year when I left, so he was maybe at the year mark, who was able to get up there in spite of everything and bring down to the ground, call an ambulance, and survived. Reconnect everything. Probably still feels it today, I think, when it's cold. So that was Dave. And then there's Ben, the guy who got him down, really new to the industry, and like mega kudos to him for having the presence of mind to carry out that aerial rescue safely, especially when it's your friend and you've seen your buddy get injured. But so another potential outcome was another outcome that did happen was Ben left the industry after that. Stuck it out for a couple more months, decided to find a different job that's safer. It's not only, I think it's an important point to make, that it's not only you that you're potentially going to injure, it's not only your life that you're affecting when you decide to take risks, and when you're deciding how you're going to manage risks. You've got so many other people around you that you're going to affect.
Yeah. So yes, let's go a little darker and talk about the effects of the worst case scenario are happening. Like who who has children in the audience? Okay, so that's a good portion of the audience. How often? Raise your hands again if you've got children. Okay, you at the back, sir, because you still got your hand up. How often do you think about? So do you one hand?
No.
Okay, so you're the wrong person to ask. who one hands who's got children? Okay.
Me.
Do you often? Does it often cross your mind if something might happen to you? If you might cut yourself? What like
Well,
we
now,
got.
in my defense, there's a difference between a situation where you could cut yourself and a situation where you get a sore arm. See, I'm not going to cut myself when I'm leaning out my stick. There's no way that it's going to come back at me.
Oh, that branch that's
It's even
jumping.
further away from me than if I was using two hands.
Okay. Okay.
Why not just use a handsaw?
Good point, Damien.
Undercut with the actual chainsaw,
pretty hard to use
top
a
cut with the
handsaw.
handsaw. Yeah, I get that.
I haven't. If I can't use two hands, I use a handsaw. With Japanese steel, I top furs out with my Sugoi. I personally, now that I haven't hit anymore, but sorry to interrupt. I don't.
No, good. Yeah, we want to hear
About
it.
8 years ago, Dylan was with this fella, but through a guy on my crew used one hand, cut his rope on the backside of the tree, and fell 50 feet and almost died. He almost had his leg amputated. He still deals with it today, and all because he just didn't use his two hands. He didn't use proper work positioning. And it changed his life forever.
Yeah.
And since I was already safe as I could be, and used one hand at that time, even though I felt it was safe, and I had way more close calls with one hand than two hands. The saw actually has two handles for two hands.
Yeah.
I
And if
think-
you read the instruction manual, obviously it says the saw must be used with two hands. I'm not sure. I'm not sure when the top handle saw was first developed, if the idea was to use it with one hand, because it was I think it was designed back in the 80s or 70s, the top handle saw. But obviously health and safety protocols evolved for a reason. They evolved because of incidents and accidents. So even if it was developed back then to be used with one hand and balanced and all that kind of stuff that people will say to you, health and safety has come along, and they've realised that it's much more dangerous, far more dangerous to use it with one hand. I don't know if anybody's seen the infographic, I think you might call it, of chainsaw injuries. It's a person like this, and there's just dots all over it, and pretty much every dot is along the left arm. There's no dots on the right arm.
But isn't that infographic from the 90s where it's like everybody who uses a chainsaw? It's not like a professional.
It definitely does incorporate like homeowners, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's not really like the audience.
No, but I see what you mean, but it still proves the point that everybody who's using a saw is cutting this arm, and they're cutting the form. Yeah. So back to what you were saying.
I just want to make a point. I'm not arguing with you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to use it two hands as much as possible. I'm just talking because I'm trying to learn.
Yeah.
Because I want to use it two hands.
Yeah.
And I just want to learn how to do it in certain situations where I'm like,
Yeah. So back to so what Dan was saying. You're saying, you don't want to twist around, and the saw's so far away from you that
I don't feel that
you
I'm
feel
in
it's
danger
way,
of
yeah,
being cut.
exactly. So just a little demonstration. Hopefully you kind of see. So if I'm holding the chainsaw with one hand.
I'm not pushing very hard here. Like,
Push a bit harder.
okay, I'm pushing hard.
Okay. Okay, right.
Okay, now I'm pushing a lot harder. That's a pretty obvious difference in the response of the saw.
So to what I felt there, it's hard to see the difference because obviously the bar is still coming back because it's pushing it back at me, so it's still going to come back. For me, the biggest difference at that point is that the flex in the saw, you realise you have far less control. That actually hurt my wrist when you just did there. But when I was holding it with one hand, you have so much less control from it, like torquing and flexing to the side. Whereas if anybody just tries that, just get somebody to push the tip of the bar back, and if you're holding a saw with two hands as it's supposed to be, yeah, you know, they're still going to be able to push the bar back, but you realise how much more control you have just from doing that little test.
I think another thing I wanted to add, you mentioned you're much safer because your rope's over here and it's further out from your body, and yeah, maybe the chance of getting a kickback and it rotating and hitting your arm is probably pretty slim. But have you ever done like a really pitchy fur removal where you've got it all over everything, it's all over your ropes, and you land it's on your gloves, and it's getting into the dead man's? Have you ever had it get into the dead man's and your throttle starts sticking on? In that position on a limb tip, how are you going to get that throttle off without changing your work position whilst the chain is spinning?
One thing you can do, safety precaution, is keep your thumb on that model. Kill is forward.
On the kill switch?
If you keep your thumb there, it comes back, and slight chance.
Yeah, that's good. They don't always work. You know, I'd rather be able to get the chain brake on and then think about things.
Well, no, so that's highlighted another point that we haven't mentioned yet, is the actual grip of the saw. And I don't know if people aren't aware, but there's so many people use the saw with thumbs on the top like this, which is a really bad habit, and it's so harder. If you get any kickback, it's so much harder to control the saw than if you wrap your thumbs around. Like you'll always see, and if you read the manual as well, I think it makes a clear point to make sure you have your thumbs wrapped under. I know it doesn't seem like a big issue, but it's a big issue for control, especially if kickback were to happen. So.
And on the top handle too, I see a lot of people keep their thumb up.
Yeah.
The top part. No, that one there.
Yeah, that one there. And I think a large part of that is because you maybe feel like if you're piecing down, you get that little bit more leverage from using those thumbs to push through. I think that's why people do it, or some people do it anyway.
A dual saw.
But that's because of poor maintenance and not sharpening your saw properly. If you have to use these two thumbs to get that little bit more leverage to get through a stem, then you're not sharpening your saw enough.
I just wanted to give one more little reason for the out on the limb situation. I've definitely had in the PNW working out here when it's fall or winter, and you're working in something with a lot of moss in it like this, or I don't know, seed or whatever, and you get all that kind of grub all over your saw. It's super slippy. I'm sure it's probably never happened to you, but I've felt there's definitely more potential to drop the saw after the cut, just due to not having a firm grip on it with one hand. I don't know if you'd agree or. Yeah, but it's at that point it's spinning around. You haven't managed to stop the chain. It's maybe going to catch your rope.
Do you want to jump up?
Yeah.
Yeah. So back to what I was saying. Is actually taking that time to think about the effects of what may happen if we had an accident at work.
Sorry.
Let me turn that off. Yeah. Who does it affect? So there's obviously the closest people around you. It's going to affect you and your family, and if obviously everybody gets ill now and again. If you get, even if you get a cold or you're off work for a couple of weeks, or you break your leg snowboarding, or you have an accident outside of work, how much harder does that become to deal with, the loss of income? It's harder to just deal with day-to-day life because we take everything for granted. We take walking down to the shop to grab a pint of milk for granted, and there's so many serious accidents that could happen that could just get taken away in an instant. So we have to use our families and the important people in our lives to actually to train our mind and to train ourselves to work in the most safe manner possible, to reduce all those risks that are put on us day to day by doing this job. So obviously, yeah, you've got your whole family. You then got the guys on the job site, like George's friend, the groundsman who had to aerial rescue somebody. You have to, obviously, it's hard. Anybody from a tree.
Yep.
Yeah. What was the situation there?
I passed out from flu, fatigue, and a crotch, and I asked him if he was okay, and he never responded. So I swung over from my tree into his tree, and there was no way I was going to pick him up. No way.
No.
And I was fit then. And I just told some guy, I just said, you got to put some spurs on it, come up here. And he was out. It took two of us to get him down, and he was out until paramedics arrived when we hit the ground.
Yeah.
And smelling salts won't come up.
Did
It's
you
not what you think it is.
Yeah.
But practicing we practiced back then. It was amazing. It worked, You're not freaking out. You're just like in the moment.
Yeah. So everybody's going to deal with a rescue situation differently, especially obviously in your situation he passed out, but it wasn't a cut or anything, so there's not a lot of blood.
Right, I couldn't imagine doing anything besides getting him on the ground while you're up there.
Yeah, like any kind of first aid is.
Well, obviously if you spurt blood out, you might want to work something out there, but
Yeah.
because it takes a long time to get him on the ground,
Exactly.
And it's
Does
his
it-
pal, and he's floppy. And
Um,
they're weird feeling.
Do you?
It's weird.
It is picking up dead weight. A human
A dead body
Yeah,
is
dead weight.
weird. It is not cooperative.
It's very strange because even if you try and get somebody to act dead weight, they still use their muscles to kind of almost aid you a little bit. And that's why practicing of an aerial rescue situation is hugely important. And so I do the tree climbing competitions quite often, and probably the most I've learned from tree climbing is the aerial rescue portion of the competition, because if you want to score the points and do well in the competition, you have to know the rules. And knowing the rules means you follow a certain protocol of how to act as if it was a real life situation, and it almost trains you and the way you want to be trained to a subconscious level, so that if anything did happen and there's blood spurting everywhere, you're not going to freak out, and you want to be able to go into autopilot, and without doing any form of aerial rescue training or having any knowledge of first aid, I'd say that there's a good chance that you're going to just go into shock or go into panic mode of some sort, and that's pretty scary, because if you go into panic mode or go into shock or just kind of lose it, but you feel like you have to do something, you have to help, so you're going to climb anyway, but now you're not thinking straight because the pressure's on, and you're like, you've got to get him down. So then are you going to be in a position where you can safely climb a tree if you're not in a solid state of mind? So aerial rescue is really important, practicing that for your crew. You ready, Georgie?
Yeah.
So Georgie, just do.
I'm gonna take this limb off here.
Some-
You might wanna.
Yeah. So luckily the people who manage the park are going to let us take off a bunch of these limbs just purely for your education. Suppose you want to saw. So he's using the non-chain saw.
There is no chain.
We're just kidding.
Can you make the noises?
Okay, take it away.
Alright, so I'll try and
I wanna hear your
speak
best
up. I wasn't
chainsaw
going to climb with that radio.
Rum!
It's got
You're not using radio?
I'm not using radios too.
Yeah, if you can't hear, you might want to kind of gather around a little bit more because you can't use his personal sound system.
So we're just gonna run through a couple of scenarios and real basic stuff, but perhaps a what not to do, and then maybe a better suggestion. And a lot of them have been brought up already, I think, in a bit of discussion. So let's just propose that I'm gonna be removing this limb, and I want to do it in two sections. So I'm gonna get out to a point over there, and I'm gonna lock the end off. So perhaps the what not to do might be to come out, get along it. I'm using my rope for stability. I've got to this point here. We're getting late in the day. I want to get the job done. I'm hanging on. Get my saw off. We'll suppose it's already running. Chain break off. Undercut. Top cut. Now if I'm making that cut here, it's pretty obvious what's going to happen. This limb's going to end up about up here somewhere, and I'm going to be down here. So I don't really know how I'm going to be hanging on to this limb in that situation. My legs, pretty hard for me to grip. Sorry for the moss. Pretty hard for me to grip this stem just with my legs. I've not got very good control of the saw. Got potential for a kickback here, definitely. And when I'm coming in to do my top cut. I don't know if you want to add anything, Dan. Something I may have forgot. But we're good.
Oh, it's pretty bad, should I say?
Sorry?
I said that's pretty good, but it's pretty bad, should I say?
That I would say is the quick way. And I apologise for just teaching people to suck eggs or whatever the expression is. But now if I was to approach this in the best way that I feel I could make that cut, stay low to the branch, facing my anchor point, work alongside it, get to the point where I want to make the cut, take my lanyard off, pop it around the stem, the branch here. Could give it a wrap. I'll start with this one. So even in this position here, I'm able to push my body weight out from the stem. I can lock my back leg. I can look for those little kinks in the branch to use as a steady my position. And nothing's really going to shake me here. These lower Ds, by the way, on the tree motion are awesome for this. You've got much more stability and much more range of movement. Yeah, could take a wrap of the lanyard if it's a long Douglas fir limb or something, or it's a London plane on a wet day and nothing's going to grip it.
Yeah, so if it's a real slippy, slimy limb, and especially if you're on the side Ds, having that lanyard around the branch is a good chance it's kind of gonna move, even if you've got some pressure on it. So what George is saying there is if you just wrap it around once for those specific situations where you get a slippy limb, then you're way more solid and it's not going to work its way down the limb.
So in this position, you can see I'm totally comfortable. I've got the anchor point. It's slightly guiding me so that my weight's coming into the branch here. It would be a bit more uncomfortable if I was on the other side. Back leg's nice and straight and locked out. If you can never lock out your limbs, you're going to save yourself energy just by putting all that force through your skeleton rather than gripping with your muscles. So nice and easily get my saw, chain brake on, fire it up, get it in position for the first cut, pop the chain brake off, make the cut, chain brake back on. No potential for a kickback now because the chain brake's on, right? Back up in position for the second cut.
Barber chair.
Chain brake off. What was that?
Barber chair?
Barber chair?
Well,
Oh, well, we'll suppose it's not going to happen in this
Great.
situation. If I was anticipating that, then yeah.
If he was anticipating that, he'd probably climb further out.
If it was going to barber chair, I'd just one-hand it with no landing.
You're talking to Dan and I. Totally.
So there we go, chain
Old
brake
school.
off, top cut. And now the same thing's going to happen with the limb. It's going to bounce up 4 or 5 feet, but I'm not going to lose anything from that happening. It's only going to take a bit more slack in this line, and I'm going to end up underneath it. So I'm going to be like this, perhaps. But I mean, that's worst case, and that's not.
But that's something that you can kind of foresee happening. If you feel like you have to take it at that position, you can foresee it popping up. You can do your undercut from that lower position and then almost go higher to try and eliminate you ending up underneath the branch.
Like that, for example, just get a bit above it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I've still got the stall by 2 hands. I can easily snap the chain brake on as it's about to pop or whatever if I think there's going to be anything that's going to send the saw back towards my system or myself.
And you feel more comfortable in that position as well.
Definitely.
Like you're not. So when you've got your lanyard around there, you quite happily, you're moving around. You could sit there for, as long as you like.
I could sit here and wait for a groundie to finish chipping or whatever,
Whereas
I'm not kind of suspended and gripping on, and I have to make this cut before I get too tired.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if I've done 30 of these, my energy levels at the end of the day are going to be completely different.
Yeah.
If I've landed in this or not.
And that point gets back to, so nobody actually said it outright, but it's kind of the underlying factor of pretty much every point that we've spoken about. The reason why people use a saw one-handed is for speed. That's nobody's actually said the word speed, but everybody's kind of reasonings behind it was they don't want to take the time to think of a different way to do it because it may take longer. But as George mentioned, being in that kind of one-handed position, slightly unstable, you might have the odd foothold here and there, but not as stable as being in a position of a good work position where you've got your lanyard on. You're gonna get fatigued much easier. So you might feel, because you're kind of rushing out here and making a cut, and I'm back again, and I'm rushing out here and I'm making another cut. That's going to feel fast to you, but over the course of the day, is that actually going to be quicker because you then start becoming way more fatigued from that style of work. But if it feels fast, it must be fast. If I feel tired at the end of the day, I must have been working hard, and I don't think that did. Then it was either an easy day or we've been working in an efficient manner.
I think Dan Krause kind of touched on it in his presentation with the setting up your throw line in the trees. Sometimes it takes you a lot longer to get your shot, and the climber's already getting up there and going for it. But you still get the job done in the same amount of time as the guy who's doing a changeover is. And well, in the shape you're in for a 50-odd-year-old dude, then you're doing something right? Just trying to charm him before you give him a little tricky question.
Hey Dan, you mentioned too that when you're cutting with one hand, there's always times when you can still slip. So whether you're on a spar pole or the end of the line, and there's times when you do slip. If you've got one hand on a saw, that's a real bad situation.
Yeah.
But if you do slip or you do gaff out, having 2 hands in that situation on the chainsaw is going to make things a lot safer. So always think of that. Whether you just cut a branch and it springs, or you're gaffing out, or you're slipping, I'd rather have two freaking hands on a saw than one
Yeah.
hand.
And the one hand that you've got on the saw is going to be the one hand that's around the trigger. If you slip,
yeah.
the natural human reaction is to grip because you want to grab hold of something quickly. So if you slip, you're going to pull the trigger.
Yeah, I mean, just you know, so you can slip, and as long as I can fall anywhere, as long as I got two hands of the saw away from my body, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But it's difficult. One hand you can slip, to have that control.
Okay.
Yeah, another little advantage of using your lanyard and a bit of a time and an energy saver is if you have a C lanyard or you make one up with this extra cross-it with the thimble eye at the end, you can set that. We're going to maybe use our imagination to, this is a massive tree with only a few lower limbs, but in a different situation where I had maybe several cuts to make in this area, I can set my lanyard as a second time point, and now I'm free to kind of work a much larger area of the tree and make several cuts from one position, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so George has got, I don't know, probably a lot of you have seen this before, but rather than you using your lanyard in a traditional way, you've got it connected to your bridge, so your center ring, and then there's like a small prusik on the end, so you basically kind of almost not choking it off, but you're making like a single line.